Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyoфvacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyoфvacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Chris Gray Faust, managing editor of Cruise Critic. Chris Gray Faust is executive editor of Cruise Critic, the world's largest online cruise resource. He's a former travel editor of USA Today and the winner of a Lowell Thomas Travel Writing Award. Chris has visited more than 100 countries. She speaks frequently on the topic of cruising, and her expertise has been featured in dozens of media outlets, including Forbes, NBC News, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Conde Nast Traveler. Welcome, Chris, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It is great to meet you virtually. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I just recently got off a cruise and now I'm in Dublin right now for a few days. So it's been a good time.
I'm jealous. What cruise did you get off?
I was on Holland America's Neustadtendam, and it was a British Isles cruise. So even though it started in Rotterdam, which is actually, in the Netherlands, and then we went around most of the UK. And then I took a few days here over in Ireland afterwards.
My next cruise is on Holland America.
Oh, I think you're going to like it.
Yeah. It's on the Rotterdam, actually.
Oh, that's the same class as the ship that I was just on. And it's a very enjoyable class of ship. There's a lot that really stood out to me. So I hope you enjoy it as well.
Yes, I'm sure I will. I was on Holland for the first time a few months ago, but I didn't really get to appreciate the cruise line that much because it was a theme cruise. It was a Soul Train cruise. So it was sensory overload. So I had a great experience with Holland, but it'll be interesting to see what it's like when it's not a theme cruise.
Oh, well, theme cruises are completely different. They're so much fun. And I bet that cruise was just the best time. I've been on the 80s music cruise a couple times, really enjoyed it. And but you're right in that a theme cruise is different than a regular cruise. And so, this way, if you liked that, then I'm sure you're going to enjoy this as well.
Yeah. Even the food was upgraded because they had a series of, they had 4 kind of celebrity chefs. And so given that it was a Soul Train cruise, all the meals, all the food was soul food infused. So I said, I don't suppose my next trip on Holland America, the food's going to be quite this good, but it was great.
You might be surprised. I mean, I ended up really being impressed by the food on this ship, and particularly they have an Asian restaurant, Tamarind, and once per cruise, they do a pop-up restaurant with Morimoto, the Japanese chef, and it is really good. I think if you like, you don't even have to like sushi because a lot of the items actually are cooked on that Morimoto meal, but it was just outstanding. And they also have a new Indonesian pop-up experience that's also really good. So I just found I was very surprised by how good the food was on Holland America, even in the buffet, which normally, it's kind of a basic snack, you eat there. But
Right.
There was one lamb shank that my husband had where he took a bite and he just looked at me and he was like, "This is so good. This is like a specialty restaurant somewhere else. And this is just the Lido here." So we were really impressed. So I hope I'm getting you hyped up for your sailing.
Oh, you are. And we did go to Tamarind. That's one specialty restaurant we did go to we went on New Amsterdam.
Oh, nice. Okay, great.
So yes. So before we talk about your time at Cruise Critic and your association with the cruise industry in general, which, is a deep association, provide us some personal insight. Where you're from, your background before entering the cruise industry, where do you live now? Anything you are willing to share.
Absolutely. Well, my story is that I'm a lifelong traveler, that I've always enjoyed traveling, always been on the road, always enjoyed seeing new places and being in different spots. I'm a journalist by training, and I worked at 4 different newspapers around the country before I ended up working at Cruise Critic. So that love of journalism and traveling and telling people what I'm seeing, no matter what the situation, that's always been part of my life. And switching then into travel and cruising, kind of my mission at the site, and I think what we share at Cruise Critic is that desire to get the right person on the right ship at all times, making sure that they have, being able to observe what's around me, like who is this ship for, who would enjoy it, and then being able to bring that to them and explain it in a way, in a very journalistic way. So that's kind of where my point of view comes from, is just that combination of loving to travel, of loving to see the world and experience different cultures, along with being able to share that information with other people, just really makes me happy. Right now, I live on the East Coast of the US, north of Philadelphia. So go birds. And I grew up in the Midwest, though. So I've lived in 10 different states around the country. So, again, just love to travel, always have.
Hmm. Now, when you said you started in, or your foundation is in journalism, and you worked at 4 places before you went to Cruise Critic. When you were working at the various places, did you focus at all on travel and cruising, or it's just more general journalism?
I started out in general journalism as, a news person. I covered things like hurricanes and, events like that, big news events, that kind of thing. My last newspaper I worked for was USA Today, and I was the travel editor there. So that's really what got me into travel. So I was in the travel journalism field before I moved into cruising. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah, so I've been within travel as a subject probably almost, wow, it's definitely more than 15 years, going on 20. So a long time in travel, and then now I'm about almost 13 years with Cruise Critics. So just in cruise.
So, say a little, it's easy for us to kind of assume that you do all of this exotic travel as the executive editor at Cruise Critic, but say a little about what it's like day to day for you at Cruise Critic.
We'll be right back.
Do you have a dream car? Mine is the Lucid Air. Are you intrigued by electric vehicles? The Lucid Air EV has been called the best driving car in the world. And the Lucid Air Sapphire is certifiably the fastest production car in the world. Listen to Lucid Driver Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, or at luciddriver.buzzsprout.com.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say there's always the glamorous parts that people see, and that is the travel, and being able to be on the road and see all the new ships and report on what's happening in the industry. The part that's like a little bit less glamorous is actually the work of running a website. There's a team of people at, a company at Cruise Critic, behind the scenes, whether that's engineers, marketing, all different types of departments. And so, the running the business of a website is actually a little bit more complicated. So, more of my time than people probably think is spent in meetings, virtually like this, through Slack or through Zoom or other types of programs, and helping to make decisions for the website and for our readers. So that's kind of the day-to-day isn't quite as exotic as people think it is, but the very fact that we're talking about cruising every day talking about what cruisers are looking for, what kind of information they need, what do they need to help make a decision, to have a good vacation. The fact that that's kind of part of what that's baked into my day every single day is a really fun part of it. So even if I'm not on the ship, I'm still enjoying myself.
Well, the second most fun part of your job, because the first most fun part has to be the travel.
Oh, absolutely. It is. Although, I've been on the road now for 3 weeks and I'm probably a little bit ready to go home. So
Ready to go home.
So I was being here in the British Isles and then being in Ireland. So I love having the balance, right? And that's kind of what's nice about it being on a cruise is that you can go somewhere and you can experience like quite a few places in a small amount of time. But then I'm like a lot of people that I want to go home for a little bit too. So.
Yeah, it's nothing like home. Nothing like home. We have after the Panama Canal cruise. That's the one on Holland America. It's a Panama Canal cruise. So that's a long. I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe 12 days. And then immediately when we come back into Miami or Fort Lauderdale, I guess it is, we'll stay overnight for a night. And then we go on another cruise, back to back. And that's not normally how we do things, but the second cruise was sort of not required, but it's our company's, I have a travel agency, so it's my travel host's annual conference. So another cruise back to back, and my wife just says, all of that water, so she's already thinking about the return home after being away for like 3 weeks on the water. So
yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a balance, right? I mean, you love the cruise and you love that, but then it's also good to come home. So, but I love that you have like a back-to-back experience and that the Panama Canal is a fantastic itinerary. So you're really going to enjoy that.
Yep. Yeah, it's our first back-to-back. Well, I guess it's called technically a side-to-side. So.
Yeah.
Two different cruise lines. So how Chris, in your view, how has the cruise industry changed over the years? And how has that affected Cruise Critic?
Well, I think just the popularity, especially since COVID, what we're seeing is that since COVID, it's one of those things where it was such a tough time for the industry, but it really has come back in such a big way that now more first timers are coming onto cruises than ever before. So, before, I think when I started at Cruise Critic 12 years ago, there were a lot of people who were just very avid cruisers that would always cruise all the time, but it was still kind of a limited part of the traveling population. It still is a small part of the traveling population, but the percentage of people that are going on the ships that have never been on a cruise before is increasing year after year after year. And it's particularly starting to resonate with, different demographics. Millennials right now are the fastest growing demographic for cruising, and the Gen Zs are also very cruise positive. So that's great for Cruise Critic in that, there's more people coming to the site really just to get the basics about what is a cruise? What are all these lines? Like, how do I even start making a decision? So I think that that's really the influx of people coming into the cruise industry who have never cruised before is probably the biggest change that we're seeing. I guess, and then the second probably biggest change is that how fast now the cruise lines are able to respond to trends that they see on shore. It used to be that like if you saw something kind of trendy happening on land, it would take a while for it to end up, it would take a few years for it to show up at sea. Now you're seeing like just a quicker pipeline where, things that are kind of popular right now, like one thing that is definitely a trend is that younger cruisers don't like to drink alcohol, as much as maybe people generations before them. And so now the cruise lines have really leaned into their mocktail program, or non-alcoholic drinks, just to, satisfy that demand. So like these kind of trends, or then also like a lot of the cruise lines have been adding, more ethnic food flavors and more international cuisines, because that's really what people want when they, there's an expectation now when you go to sea that you're going to be able to have a lot of the same choices there that you have on land. And people are kind of demanding that. And so the cruise lines have responded, and there's just a quicker turnaround to make sure that the cuisine and offerings on the ship are more similar to what you would find on land.
Yeah, I suspect one example of what you're talking about. I haven't been on the newest, or I haven't been on the Icon class ships for Royal, but they have like milkshake bars. That's something that's pretty different and pretty unique, and seems to be, playing to that millennial audience, that newer audience that they're trying to reach.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Icon class, Royal developed that specifically with millennial families in mind. And
Oh, okay.
everything about that ship is designed for that type of family, and really for what millennials have told Royal Caribbean that they want. And so one thing that's a little bit different too is how families now, how young families are using the kids club. It used to be that, and it still is to a degree, that the kids club was like very important, that but when families would go on, the parents were kind of expecting that their kids would go to the kids club, and they would almost have a little bit separate vacations. That's not really how a lot of millennial families want to vacation now. They want to be around their kids more often. And so when you look at the different zones on Icon of the Seas and Star of the Seas, which is the one that just came out, it's very much that you can spend all your time in one neighborhood. The different neighborhoods they have on the ship. You could spend your time in one neighborhood and you can have everything there that your family could want, which includes like somewhere to some kind of recreation, some kind of specialty restaurant, some kind of free, place to eat.
Casual dining. Mm-hmm.
And also, and also a bar, a bar that has both, non-alcoholic drinks for the kids and alcoholic drinks. So kind of this divide where there's like more of these adult spaces versus just places for kids, that started to blur a little bit. And that's a lot of that is driven by the fact that millennial families want to spend more time together.
Of course, COVID is the biggest story impacting cruising in my lifetime. I have to say, Cruise Critic certainly brought me, and I suspect a fair amount of the listeners, a lot of solace during the cruise shutdown. I was climbing the walls, but would turn to Cruise Critic for a sense of hope. Talk about that time.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was, huge impact on the cruise industry, as we all know. I mean, cruising was going gangbusters in 2019. It was really looking for a big 2020. And then, of course, COVID came and hit. And for a lot of the industry in the US, certainly cruising was closed for 18 months. And what we did at Cruise Critic is that we really turned into a news organization, which many of us being journalists are, we have had that background. And so we kind of kept the site going with, writing about the news. We followed the CDC and their different health protocols that they were talking about for cruising. Different countries tried, put cruises together with different safety precautions before the US. And so we were able to cover what was going on internationally and kind of say, okay, could we be able to bring this to the US? Yeah, we were climbing the walls, but there was a lot of news going on, and we also loved that our readers and our community that we have at Cruise Critic, because of course, Cruise Critic has the forums, which is a huge community of people who are always talking cruising. They were kind of talking about their favorite trips and where they couldn't wait to go. And when this is over, what is this like? Or let's pretend we're on the Lido deck, those kind of fun things that I think did serve as a nice gathering place for people when they couldn't meet up on the ships.
Chris, I recall a time where you mentioned the forums, and Cruise Critic was the forum. And now you have, a lot of specific forums. Well, you got specific forums on Cruise Critic as well, but you got a lot of specific forums on Facebook, various Facebook groups. I suspect that's a challenge for you.
We're on Facebook too. Cruise Critic is out there with everybody else. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're going to start being on TikTok. We're out there too. And we're everywhere the cruisers are, there's Cruise Critics. So, that's kind of something that we've learned, it's not just one spot, really. Cruise Critic is, we're out there wherever our readers are.
Let's talk about cruising. Are you doing much cruising these days, or do you tend to delegate that to staff?
We all cruise on our editorial team, and I cruise generally, I'd say on our editorial team, we generally do about 8 to 10 cruises a year. And so I pretty much track on that. I think I'm up to total since I've been at Cruise Critic, I'm at 112 cruises total. So, we really focus on new ships a lot because our readers really want to see like what's the newest and greatest. But we also go back on older ships too, just to make sure like things are still what we think they're going to be, and sometimes we go back on a ship that was highly rated and we're like, you know what, this ship maybe needs a little bit knocked down in our ratings because it's gotten a little older or some things are slipping. Or sometimes we go on a ship and we're pleasantly surprised and we're like, wow, this ship is actually doing amazingly well, and again, I was just on a ship that was not so new, Neustadt, which it's not the oldest ship, but it's not the newest either. Well, maybe it is one of their newest. Anyway, it's not brand new. And, it's doing great, doing fantastic. So we do a mix of them. We're on the newest, and then sometimes we also go on some of the more exotic trips that our readers are asking about. I went on the Amazon earlier this year, the Amazon River in Peru, and that was a fantastic trip. So, we're always out there. We love to cruise. We love to travel. That's why we're there. And so, yeah, I'm always going to be cruising.
So speaking of that around the Amazon, I was just about to ask you, give us some highlights of recent cruises you've done, because I know that you probably have gone on most of the newer ships that I have on my bucket list. So talk about go back in the last year or so. What have you done specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned going on the Amazon, and I went with a company called Aqua Expeditions, which is a great little expedition cruise company that also now is is partly owned by Ponant. And they were fantastic. The Peruvian Amazon was not necessarily, I wasn't sure I wanted to go to the Amazon because I have a little bit of a fear of bugs, and I was like, oh, there's gonna be too many bugs. I don't know if I want to go. But then I had some people tell me, like, if you go on the Amazon, it's an amazing trip. You see things, and it's a nice blend of wildlife and culture. And so I think you're really going to love it. So I took a chance, and I ended up having one of the best cruises I've ever had, where it was a very small, ship, but just the service was really great. They hired, people from Amazonas, indigenous guides that really were able to give us insight into the culture. And plus we saw a lot of cool, animals. We got to go fishing for piranhas, saw a lot of monkeys.
Fishing for piranhas. I mean, aren't those the fish that eat people? Or is that only on television?
Fishing for piranhas. Great. When I caught, no, they don't eat people, but I mean, they're not, you don't want to swim with the piranhas. Let's put it that way. But you don't want to, once you catch one, you don't want to put it too close to your face. But it was really fun. It was really enjoyable, and I learned so much. That's what I love about cruising, is when it can get you, like, particularly on an expedition cruise, is when it can get you somewhere that you don't really know what it's like, except what maybe you've read in books and magazines, and then being able to see it firsthand and talk to people and guides who are from that region and have them explain to you what their culture is about. It's fantastic. It's the best type of travel. I think it's so immersive, and I would say that was definitely a highlight of the last year for sure.
Now, forgive me for this dumb question, but I've never heard of fishing for piranha. Can you eat them?
They're really bony. People in the Amazon do eat them. Our ship had plenty of other fish to eat, so we kind of threw them back because, like I said, we had much better fish on board than like a little bony piranha. But people do eat them. Yeah.
Okay. How many did that sounds like a wonderful expedition cruise. How many did it hold?
That was pretty small. That one was 48 people.
Okay. Okay. Give us another highlight from this past year.
Another expedition cruise I went on that I really liked. I went out with Scenic to Greenland. And that's another one where, you just don't know what you don't always know what you're going to expect when you go somewhere like Greenland. Like, what's there? What are we going to learn? What am I going to see? And we ended up seeing so many glaciers, tons of whales, just whales everywhere, really getting a look at the culture there, the Inuit culture up there, and seeing what their life was all about. And just these spectacular places that very few people have been. And I think I love that about cruising, that it can take you to these places that you look on a map and you're like, where am I? Like I love being so remote that, that's exactly what my friends are always asking me. Where are you now? I've never even heard of that. Those are the places that I love to go. And I love that cruising can take you there. But that being said, I mean, there's some great, those are like the expedition cruises and all that. There's other ones that are great that are just on more mainstream, ships that are also fantastic. It's fun to go to Bermuda with some friends, for example. I did that last year on Norwegian and had a great time. Took Norwegian Joy.
Which ship?
Norwegian Joy, and I left out of New York. And, that again is a little bit of an older ship. But some friends went with us and we had a fantastic time. Cruising is really well suited for groups, whether it's your family or whether it's groups of friends. And what's great is everyone can do their own thing and then you come together for dinner, right? And you can talk about your day. And so that is just, it's just a nice way to cruise. And so that was also a highlight. We could all get together at night and talk about what we did and be able to share and have a good time.
Let's go way back. We have some aspiring cruisers listening. So I always ask guests to recollect their first cruise, just to give some of these aspiring cruisers something to think about. When, what ship, and what were your initial impressions of cruising?
Well, I mean, first of all, my parents used to cruise, and they would cruise without my sister and I because they saw that as their time away. So they were always kind of avid cruisers, before they brought my sister and I on cruises. So they would go on lines like Crystal and Cunard and like just kind of go off and have like their own little luxury vacation and leave us with grandma, that kind of thing. And so when we got to go, I didn't go on my first cruise till I was 25, I want to say. So we're talking a long time ago. And it was a family cruise over Christmas and New Year's. And we were on Carnival Ecstasy, which just recently went out of service. And we had such a great time as a family. It was, again, I mean, I had no idea I'd be covering cruises for a living at that point. I was, working at, I think, my second newspaper. My sister was still, in college, and we had a cabin together and we just had a blast. There's a picture of us from, again, like 1995. And it's back when people kind of dressed up more for formal nights. So I think it was New Year's Eve. And we are sitting in our formal outfits. My sister and I are on a rotating piano, like sitting on it, and we have maracas in our hands because we're singing to this song, and we've clearly had one too many cocktails, and it's just such a cute like photo and moment in time. And that family cruise was really, it was just I just remember my family laughing a lot and having such good memories of that. Again, it would be years, a good 20 years between that cruise.
Oh, wow.
And the next one I did. But yeah, no, there was a 20-year gap, in between that first cruise and when I started covering cruises for a living. But I mean, particularly because right now, some people aren't with us anymore, right? And so it's nice to like have that as a memory. Like cruising is always great for these family memories that you just don't know when that will be the last one, right? So like it's just so nice to like have these memories in my bank, and that I don't know if it may necessarily got me hooked, but we had such a good time as a family that I'll always remember it.
So that second cruise, you probably were in the travel part of journalism, or you weren't yet at Cruise Critic, right?
I was actually my second cruise was was actually working for Cruise Critic as a freelancer, because for a while there was a period where I had my own blog called Chris Around the World, and I was a freelance writer, and that's kind of how I got hooked up with Cruise Critic and started doing some freelance work for them. So my second cruise could not have been more different than the Carnival Ecstasy. My second cruise was on an Island Windjammers small ship sailboat, so with 12 people. And so it was barefoot sailing in the Caribbean. And I think what I took away from that was that there's such a full range of cruising, right? You can do everything from, we were talking about those Icon class ships with Royal Caribbean, which are like cities on the sea, right? There's like 7,000 passengers, 3,000 crew. That's 10,000 people. My husband likes to say that's bigger than his hometown. You can go everything from that to a 12-person sailboat, in the Caribbean. So just like when people say to me, I don't know if I like cruising, I'm like, you probably like some kind of ship. You just don't know what it is yet, because there is such a range. So yeah, even in those very first cruises I did, it was a wide range from like a big kind of mainstream carnival ship to a small like barefoot sailing ship.
You mentioned some highlight cruises in the past year, but in your career at Cruise Critic, I suspect you have gone on some amazing cruises. I know this is difficult, but share with us what are your most memorable cruises?
It's interesting because people, there's some of them are the other obvious ones where you're going to amazing places. Like, going to Antarctica is certainly very special. And I went with Viking's expedition ship, and seeing Antarctica for the first time, it's so remote and so beautiful that it's very emotional and overwhelming and great. But honestly, for me, it's about who you go with and like what that is, because cruising is kind of meant to be shared. It can be meant to be shared. And so I'd say one of the most memorable cruises I ever did was with Windstar Cruises. They had a theme cruise around the Monaco Grand Prix, F1 race.
Oh, wow.
And I was able to bring my dad, who, was always a motorhead and really into racing. And I was able to bring him to that on that special theme cruise. And he just loved it because for him, it was such a bucket list and he was so into it. And just being able to like see that you can make something like that, something so personal like a bucket list cruise, come true for somebody in an easy way. Because for me to have arranged for my dad to go see the Monaco Grand Prix, not on a cruise, would have been, kind of more of an ordeal. I would have had to, get the tickets and book the hotel, figure out the flight, all that type of stuff. Whereas when you go on a cruise for something like that, there's one flight, you go over and you get on your cruise somewhere in Europe, and then the cruise line kind of takes care of everything for you. And, my dad isn't with me anymore, but the fact that I was able to take him on that cruise, I mean, that's the type of thing that just stays with you forever. So
What a lasting memory.
oh, for sure. Yeah. And so I would say that for me, really, it's not necessarily always about, where you go, but it's who you're going with.
Now, a number of the ships or the cruises you've mentioned have been sort of either expedition ships or smaller ships like Windstar. Are you kind of partial towards smaller ships?
I like them all. I like big ships too. That's what I'm saying. I go on a little bit of everything. Another big ship I just went on recently. I went on Disney to Alaska, and I was able to bring my sister. And there you go. There again, you go back to who you're there with. And when you go, with somebody like a sibling on a Disney cruise, even if you don't have kids, with you or anything, there's something about Disney and sometimes cruising in general that brings you out that inner child,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for her, that we used to watch Disney movies as a kid. And so like being able to, even though that's a larger ship, it's still a very personal experience because, we were able to share our memories of these different Disney, movies and being on the ship where everything's reinforced. And even this last cruise I was just on with Holland America, I mean, that was a great cruise too. So no, I like them all, again, like I said, it kind of depends on where you're going. It depends on who you're with. There's the ships themselves have so much to offer. So
now, I don't suppose the executive editor of Cruise Critic would be able to share her favorite ship or cruise line, but what you probably can share, what about ports? That should be a safe topic. What are your favorite ports?
You're right in that I can't. Yeah, you're right in that I don't play favorites. So, I appreciate that you acknowledge that. So thank you. Favorite ports. I mean, for me, I really do love I love a Caribbean cruise, particularly to get out of the cold in the winter. I live up in Philadelphia area, so it does get a little, chilly there in January. And at that point, that's when I'm like, I really want to be in St. Martin. So St. Martin is definitely a port that I always look for on an itinerary, because as you know, there's a lot of different Caribbean itineraries out there.
Sure.
But if I see one that has St. Martin on there, that makes me more willing to and likely to be like, you know what, that's the one for me, because I really do like that island. I like the mix of Dutch and French influences. So that's a favorite in the Caribbean for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the future. What cruises do you have coming up?
Well, I'm going to be on Cunard's Queen Elizabeth in that's leaving from Miami. That's my next cruise in October. And what's unique about that, it's the first time in a long time that Cunard has actually home ported a ship in Miami to be in the Caribbean. So for a whole season. So I'm really looking forward to seeing like how a line that's kind of known for being a little bit more formal, which is what Cunard is. They do the high teas and are very, very British. I'm interested to see what they're like in the Caribbean, where that's kind of the opposite vibe. So I'll be interested to see how that pans out. And then in November, Viking Vesta. And I'm going to be sailing that from Istanbul to Athens. And I'm interested to see. I mean, Viking has great, ocean ships, about 900 people, a little bit over 900 people. And so it's a nice size for that type of exploration. They could go to some smaller ports. And I'm also interested to see what it's like to be in Greece at that time of year in November.
Do you have any leisure travel planned, like land trips, not non cruise critic related? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, I have a place in Sanibel, Florida, that my family place, and so I'm going to be there for 6 weeks at the end of the year. So that time I'm not cruising. I'm going to be just in Sanibel enjoying the beach over the holidays.
For someone who I suspect has done it all or most of it, what's left on your cruising or travel bucket list?
I'm definitely someone who's going to see it all, and the more I was commenting to my husband just this week that I'm like, the more I see of a place, the more I want to see. So like right now we're in Ireland and we're only here for a few days, and I'm like, okay, we have to come back and get a car and drive around the entire island. I want to be able to do that. So I'm always planning more trips to get even more into a place, and I also haven't cruised very much around in Africa, and so there's more itineraries all the time that are being developed. So I really need to do more of that, and even like going to Morocco, that kind of thing. So there's still quite a bit. I've still got a lot to see.
That's my ultimate bucket list item, is to go to Africa. And at one time, I tried to put together a group where we would, fly to Africa and then take Amber Waterways river cruise, but I couldn't get the money affordable for a number of folks. So we are going to do a group trip to Africa, but it's going to be a land trip to Kenya and Egypt. Have you been to Africa at all?
I've been to Egypt. I did a Nile River cruise, and I mean that's a fantastic river cruise. I mean, all that history, and all the ships, all the river ships do that cruise very well, where they have Egyptologists on board. They're explaining all the history. You don't have to have a degree yourself, just have some people on board who know quite a bit, and you just seeing the pyramids and all those ancient sites. It just really opens up your eyes and just makes you think in so many ways about so many things. So I would highly recommend a Nile River cruise. There's more options now than ever before. More river cruise lines are getting into the Nile cruising. So there should be, whenever there's more line somewhere, generally the price starts to come down. So maybe we're going to see a little bit lower prices there. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out because a Nile River cruise is a part of this excursion that we're doing. This land trip we're doing. I don't know who the cruise line is. I'm sure it's sort of not a major cruise line, but that is of the 14 days that we're spending, that is that makes up like 4 of the days. So
Oh,
that's good.
fantastic. That's great. That
Yep.
sounds like a
Yep.
really good trip.
Last thing about the future, to the extent that you can share, Chris, what does the future hold for Cruise Critic?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of exciting initiatives that we're doing. Stay tuned in October. We're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary. Cruise Critic is 30 years old, which, on the internet is like 90 years old, right? So we're doing we have a big event planned for then. So stay tuned for more information on what's coming there. Um, and just a lot more video, honestly. So people will see more of us.
All right, all right. Well, before we let you go, Chris, we usually ask our guests some light or even fun cruise questions, and senior executives like to have fun too. So you don't get away. First question is kind of a softball. How do you spend your me time?
I mean, because I have two modes. I'm either really always on the go or I'm just a slug. So, when I'm out in the world, and traveling, like right now we're in Dublin, I am doing everything we possibly can. I did a food tour this morning. I'm working a full day, and then I'm going out to see traditional music tonight. So like that's my go mode. Okay, when I'm out on the road. When I am home, it is me and my husband and the dogs, and then sometimes, friends and family watching sports, Philly sports, very laid back, very much like getting in touch with the people at home. So, yeah, those are my two modes. I'm either doing it all or I'm doing nothing. So, yeah.
You got to be in your glory with respect to Philadelphia football.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. We're excited.
Which I am in my glory as well. I lived most of my adult life in Delaware, so
Okay.
so I very much relate to Philadelphia, and actually,
Good.
actually have worked, you know, uh, in Philly.
Oh, you did?
Okay.
Okay. One of my newspapers was the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Oh yeah, I subscribed, of course. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
All right. Next question: what's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
Well, I'm a wine lover. I've studied wine a little bit and have, gone on wine trips around the world. And so I'm a little sometimes critical of the wine list, but generally I don't go to, I'm kind of boring in that way. I love doing wine tastings when I'm on board, if they have a specialty type of tasting that you can do. Definitely a French rosé if it's a little hot out, that kind of thing. If I have to have a cocktail, I'm more like, I guess, a margarita fan. I do like margaritas. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge drinker on board. Generally wine with dinner is kind of my vibe. So I'm not necessarily the one like, cutting it up at the out not at the pool deck, maybe later in the night, but I'm not the first. That's not the first thing I do when I'm on board is grab a
Hmm.
drink. So
Now, I heard you, I think I heard you mention a wine cruise. I know Emma Waterways does
yeah.
something like that. You say you've done a wine cruise?
I have done, I did do a wine cruise with Alma Waterways, and they do have a great product with that.
Oh, it was, you did it with Emma. Okay.
I did, yeah, a few years ago. Well, it's a while back now, but yeah, I went on the Danube with them, and they had they what they do is they bring on a winery in partnership, and so that winery has a representative on. And what's often really great is you can compare their wines, which are often from the U.S., with the wines in Europe. And so we were on the Danube where the main Gruner Veltliner and some other white wines are somewhat comparable to some of the white wines from the Oregon area, and so they were bringing their wines on board for us to compare with the ones that were there in Austria. And so it was just a really fun cruise. It's kind of like a theme cruise, like we were talking about, like Soul Train or like the '80s, only it's all around wine. So the great thing about any kind of theme cruise is you're around other people that have the same passion you do. So you can dork out as much as you want, right? So that's
Yeah, my
fun.
my listeners have heard me. I rave about theme cruises all the time, and they have heard me say many times exactly what you just said. That you're around people where you share commonality before you get off the airplane. You
Yeah.
have some affiliation with the people you're going to be traveling with. You know, no one goes on the Soul Train cruise or the Star Trek cruise and they don't like Star Trek
Right.
or they don't like
Exactly.
funk music, you know? So, okay. What's your most, oh, did you say food? I asked for your favorite cruise drink and cruise food.
I love this new trend, or it's, where almost all the ships have sushi on board now. Like before they didn't used to, and now like almost like most ships will have a sushi bar. So I usually will splurge to get sushi at least one night on a cruise, because sometimes the food can be kind of heavy. And so it's nice just to be able to have, I love Japanese food. So it's great to be able to have sushi. But I will say the other thing I'm a little bit of a sucker for in the main dining room is if they have escargot, because you're not going to make that at home. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to make snails at home. I'm just not, like I don't even know where you get them. I mean, I'm not, there's no way. So the fact that I can have that on a ship is really fun. It's a fun thing you don't get to eat very often. It feels special. And again, I'm only going to get it on a ship. So I'm going to have it.
I'm glad you brought that up. If I were answering these questions, that's my cruise food tradition on ships. I have escargot whenever available. That's one of the things I love about celebrity. I'm not a huge main dining room person, but in the main dining room on celebrity, at least the edge class ships, they have escargot as an option every night.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Yeah.
yeah, every night. I mean, you can choose that, and when I'm on Celebrity, I do. So, but my first river cruise was last year, and that was on Alma, and we went to France, among other places, and escargot there is served totally differently than on ships. I mean, it's served in the shell.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
you can actually tell it's a snail.
yeah, yes, yes.
I don't know. Some people, I like them both ways. It's kind of fun sometimes to be, sometimes you don't want to think of that what it is, right? But then it is, when you get it in the shell, it's kind of fun to see it. It's a good picture, that's for sure.
I like on the ship though. I like dipping like the bread and
Oh
just like
yeah,
the garlic butter that the escargot is swimming in.
exactly.
So, okay, what's your most wonderful or memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
I mean, there's been a lot of, so many stories. I think what I'm gonna get to talk about though is like going back to like the theme cruise and like how you can kind of, when you're with people that love the same things that you do and how special that can be, So when I went on the 80s cruise for the first time, I didn't bring my husband because he's a little older and he doesn't love 80s music. So instead, I brought one of my college friends who is the same age as me. And so she loved all these same songs the same time I did. You know what I mean? And so there was something, and also, I mean, I've known her longer. I knew her in the 80s. I didn't know my husband in the 80s. And so, there was something as soon as we kind of got into the vibe of the ship and how it was all decked out and all the 80s music's everywhere, I feel like we actually turned 18 again. And suddenly we were 18 and we had so much energy and we were running around seeing all these concerts, eating pizza. Like that's all we would eat. Like we didn't have time to eat in the main dining room. So we're like just living off slices of pizza and, maybe a few drinks and sleeping late and then doing it all over again. And it was just, we got to meet some of the artists that again, they're not, at this point they're aging rock stars, right? But like you remember them back when they were on MTV. And so it
Right,
seems like
right.
a good, and so I was able to interview the host of that cruise that time was Dee Snider from Twisted Sister,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
And I was able to interview him and like we actually started chatting. And so then the first concert, so the first time that he's doing his set, we're up near the front row and he does this like he sees me right in the audience, like as I'm in maybe the third row, and he looks right at me and does like this, thumps his chest, then points at me like, yeah, yeah, you. And I'm like, yeah, screaming. My friend turned to me, and again, this is someone who's known me since I've been 18. She's like, "You have never been cooler in your life than right now. You have never been cooler." And like I was,
That's great.
and I was trying then to explain it to other people from a different generation, and they're like, "Who's Dee Snider? Like, what are you talking about?" And I'm like, "No. At one point, he was like a big deal." Anyway, it's one of those things where it's kind of like you had to be there, that time and place, right? But yeah.
That sounds like me when I try to explain to millennials some of the people on the Soul Train cruise, because it's all people from back when Soul Train was popular.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's a different time, and yeah. So
that was great. That was great. Okay, last question. I call this an oddball question because it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with cruising. But first of all, let me preface by saying you have a large following. So welcome to the many Chris Gray Faust fans and friends listening. We hope your fans have enjoyed what they have heard at the Joy of Cruising podcast, and we'll come back for future episodes. Share one thing, Chris, that my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about Chris.
well, I'm kind of an open book, so a lot of my friends know a lot about me. But one thing probably that not everybody knows about me is they might know a little bit of this, is my love of New Orleans and my infinity with New Orleans. I used to work at the New Orleans Times-Picayune in my 20s, and spending your 20s in New Orleans is is definitely a choice. It's a wild place to be, and it was a wild place to be in the 90s, living there. And I just will always love New Orleans. This year marked, the anniversary of Katrina, a significant anniversary for Katrina, the 20th anniversary. And I've loved and been to New Orleans pretty much. I left before Katrina, but went down to cover it, the aftermath of the storm. And so I love New Orleans. I go back a lot. I'm part of a Mardi Gras crew, and I still, go crew of muses, and I still ride with my friends from that time period. And yeah, so I think just, and New Orleans is a great cruise port too. So, that's probably, even though I live in Philly and root for the birds, and I always like to say sometimes I married Pennsylvania, but my love is New Orleans. So.
Well, that's the third thing we have in common. So there's escargot, there's the Eagles, and New Orleans. I used to go to New Orleans every year for the Essence Music Festival.
Oh, nice.
So I became a fan of the Times-Picayune, even when I wasn't in New Orleans. I would read it online, and I love the food.
Yeah.
Charbroiled oysters and white chocolate bread pudding, and I can go on. You've been the deal. So
Yeah, no, I saw Prince. The last time I saw Prince was at Essence Festival, so I love.
then we were there together. That
Oh
was
my
the
gosh,
last.
that's amazing! Yeah.
His last appearance.
Yep,
Yes,
yep,
yes,
yep.
I was there. I was there for that show. And even speaking of Katrina, I was there the year of Katrina. It happened I think it was about 2 months after the festival. And I can remember places that we sat, both in the convention center and in the Superdome. I think it was the Superdome then.
Yep.
During Katrina's, height, I would see people sitting in those same, or trapped. I don't know about trapped, but
Yeah.
in those same places, and so yeah, I could talk to you for days about New Orleans.
I know. We'll have to do a whole podcast just about New Orleans.
Yep. Chris, it has been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. All to the best to you and Cruise Critic, and congratulations in advance to Cruise Critic on its, 30 years?
30 years, yeah.
So all the best in your future endeavors. And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.